Okay. Hi, everyone. We're talking about International Women's Day, and we're making it International Women's Month. The theme for International Women's Day this year is Inspire Inclusion. And so I wanted to do that by talking to women who inspire me, that I admire. Every single one of them is someone that I know and love. And so today I'm talking to my friend Cheryl, who I have been friends with forever. Cheryl is the person that I called when Dumbledore died, to talk about it.
I know.
And beyond that, she's been my friend for many, many years. And so I really wanted to talk to her about her career and her relationship and all of that. But Cheryl, I'll throw it to you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello everyone. I'm happy to be here, and it's great to be here with my old friend Leah. And I am actually a lead pastor at a small church in Fairview, Texas, that's north of Dallas. And my husband Tim and I have been married for 25 years, and we have 3 emerging adults and one really cute mini schnauzer. And yeah, we're just living here and trying to figure out what it looks like to mostly just have the two of us here and doing things these days.
Yeah, like really young empty nesters because you started having kids really young. So
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
what are we going to do with all this time in front of us?
Right.
So
That's right.
when I met Cheryl, she had one little baby, right? So and now she's her kids are all like like out walking out the door. So yeah, so we've been friends a really long time. We met in church and then have had this friendship over all these years. So however,
Right.
I guess roughly however old, I almost as old as Riley, I guess, because she was a
Yeah.
baby. So
Right. Yeah. I
so
know, 23 years.
yeah, a long time, very long time. So long time friends. And so we've been through ups and downs with each other throughout our lives, changes, and different living in different places. Cheryl was in Ireland and I was in Seattle, and then now I'm in London and she's in Texas. So we've been kind of all over the place. Um,
That's right.
I wanted to talk a little bit about this job you have. There's still, after all these years, there are still jobs that we sort of consider like these are partitioned for men and these are jobs for women. And of course, that's not accurate. But the
Yeah.
job you have as a lead pastor, I think often in a lot, especially in a lot of Christian circles, is considered like that's a man's job. Talk about how you got there, what made you go there, and really what that looks like for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for starters, I never thought I would get to do what I'm doing. I mean, at some point in the journey of so many doors closing and so many voices saying it wasn't in the cards, you just start to think, well, maybe they're right. And then, of course, we moved to Texas, and I was like, okay, for
For
sure the door
sure.
is closed because we're in the Bible Belt. And but I've just been on this journey. I mean, for a long time, and I've always known that I wanted to be involved in congregational ministry. Even as a young teenager, I had inclinations that I wanted to do that, and that would be something life-giving for me to pursue. And you really do, I think, feel a sense of calling to keep going through all of the boundaries and hurdles and closed doors that come your way. But I just kept stepping forward and kept going forward and trying to get an education and praying that those doors would open or even windows would open.
You like
And
climb through, break it.
it really is kind of like a, "Ooh." um, but every time I feel like there was a time when it seemed like, okay, it's time to give up on this. A door would open either to be part of a program or to be part of a ministry. And also, I can't deny that Tim and I have quite a bit of privilege that has allowed us to be able to get out of situations that would have probably made it so that I couldn't do this. Like when we were able to move to Portland, Oregon, and be part of an egalitarian church there. And not everyone can move out of a abusive or spiritually limiting church. And so privilege has played a part in it. But there was also intentionality with that we kept pushing for those and looking for those spaces. And so I just continued with school. And then we moved here, and I really did think that that was the end of congregational leadership for me. And this door opened, and I was shocked and surprised when I heard there was a church that would hire a woman pastor. I have heard that before, and it never ended up being true that they were really ready. And this church was ready. And so I give a lot of credit to the leaders and the work that they've been doing there over the years. I think to follow the Spirit's calling to what they believe that God wants the church to look like, and how God wants the church to function. And I'm just surprised and thankful that I get to be the pastor there and walk alongside them.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I think it's it is a testimony to just sticking it through, right? Like, and just saying, this is when the door opens, I'm going to walk through it. And there is courage there, and there is heartbreak along the way. Like, there's all the things that can happen, right? So I love that. And I mean, obviously having known all of the steps along the way, I think, it's so cool that it just like, oh, there it is.
Right.
There it is.
I know.
When you think about, a lot of us, when we think about sort of more traditional roles, or so like CEOs and companies where I've worked at, a lot of them have wives that stay home, or they have partners that do something else that is maybe seen as diminished, right? Like, compared to this role that this person has, or whatever. But I think, I also know some CEOs who are married to some pretty powerhouse women, right? So that's also possible. But when you think about your partnership with Tim and how that plays a role in how you lead this church, but also in your relationship and what it looks like for him, what comes up for you? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. We were really fortunate to, even when we did the dreaded premarital counseling as young people that were engaged, we were fortunate to not have a mentor who tried to get us to fit into prescribed roles.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's surprising to me even now. It was all about, what are you passionate about? What are you gifted in?
Yeah.
And how we could work alongside each other as partners. And I didn't think that was that big of a deal. But over the years, I've come to see more and more that it really was different, because a lot of people that have grown up in church didn't have that. It was like, these are the roles they're prescribed that you have to fit into. And that just would not have worked for us.
Yeah.
I am a spiritual leader. I've known I'm a spiritual leader, and Tim knew that. And he is too. I mean,
Yeah.
we're great partners in that way. We work together in tandem very well in at our church and in our home. But he also loves to cook, and I don't. So there's just a lot of ways where those prescribed roles never worked for us. And there were times when we would try to fit into those, and it just was disastrous. That wasn't it wasn't us. And we felt like we didn't want to have to disassociate from ourselves to be in partnership, or even to partner with a church. And so we've just, over the years, come more and more into our own. And thankfully, we've also been able to move towards each other in that process. But
Yeah,
yeah, he's
I
a
love
big
that.
part.
Yeah,
He is.
no, and I love that, because I do think that there's an element of like, a lot of the conversations I'm having with women are about sort of courage, and courage to say, I won't play small. I won't make myself into something that I'm not. I will have my own voice. And I love that in this particular story, like, it is the two of you moving in that direction, both of you being courageous enough to say, I don't want to be something I'm not. So let's be ourselves, and let's be that together. And what does that look
Right.
like? Partner in that way. And
Yeah.
it's a healthy dynamic, right? Let's both people be
Right.
who they are. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's fun too, because I love when we go do stuff like, is the one in our relationship who makes the soup that we take to someone at church who's sick. And I love that we get to show that this can look different.
Yeah.
And I think that really kind of stretches people's imaginations. And in some ways that sounds silly, that in 2023, Tim taking soup and me being the person to pray, it seems ridiculous. But it does stretch the imagination for some people about what relationships and what God's intentions might be. And so I've enjoyed part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think it's interesting, especially for those of us who know both of you. Like you are someone who loves, like you do such a good job making your house beautiful, which seems like this very feminine wife thing.
Yeah.
And Tim is super scientific and logical and numbers, and he memorizes things. And we're like, Tim, what are you talking about? What are
Right.
you talking about right now? Thanks for
Yeah.
being my Trivial Pursuit partner all those years ago, so that I
I
can
know,
win.
that's right.
I'm like, I'll take Tim.
Yeah, I know. I'm the risk taker that like Tim always laughed at playing Clue with me because I would go through like 3 rounds and be like, okay, I
I'm
know
ready.
it. Always wrong, never right. But someday it will happen and it'll be awesome. I'm
It'll be
counting
worth
on
the
that.
risk. I will win and the game will be over.
That's right.
Cheryl won in 2 rounds. How did that happen?
I know. I'm gonna get a t-shirt when that happens.
He's like, yeah, she's been trying to do that for 45 years.
Yeah,
Right?
that's right. He's like, it's never gonna happen.
Never gonna happen. The odds are not in your favor. I've run the numbers.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, he's very analytical, and
Yeah.
I'm very emotional. And but over the years, again, we've both sort of gone in different journeys with that. Both of us becoming more in touch with those sides of ourselves. And
It's
yeah.
funny because as we're talking, I'm thinking about your mom, which is really funny. Like I just thinking about like because your mom has this like she's like my knowledge of your mom. She has this like sweet, soft nature, but she's like fierce, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about her in this context, like and how that influenced who you are, right? Because she is this little fierce fireball underneath this like placid,
Yeah.
got this.
Yeah.
But nobody's
Yeah.
gonna mess with her, right?
That is how all of the women in my mom's family are. They
Yeah.
are all fierce and very like loyal. And I mean, if you I just think I know that there are some parts of that where people like it's so unhealthy to be so loyal. But I think as women we need to have other women like that in our corner who are
Yeah.
like, I know this sounds toxic, but if you mess with us, that is the end. You're never getting back in the circle. And
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that we need that, especially as young women. You just need to have those people in your life that are they're behind you 100%. And we might even give each other a hard time and mess with each other, but at the end of the day, that is, our people in our support system, and they are incredibly fierce in all areas of their life, and especially when it
Yeah.
comes to people they love.
And I think it's interesting because I think that we know that just statistically, we know that women in general have a more limited network of like around them. And so their opportunities are sometimes diminished because of that limitation. But
Right.
it's funny, as you're talking, I'm thinking like, my network may be limited. Mine's not very limited because I've worked mostly with men for so
Sure.
long that I actually have my network's not
Across.
that limited. I'm really, I sound like I'm very privileged to have a very broad network, but I know women who have a very limited network. And
Yeah.
men just sort of naturally have a network based on there being so many of them in certain pockets. But the networks we have are fierce. Like the people in my corner are in my corner. And to your point, would like, if something was said about me, they'd be like, that's not true. I don't even know what happened, but that's not true. Right. Like,
Right. Exactly.
so,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
that sometimes even just having that makes us go, okay, I can be myself and I'm going to push through and take the opportunities that present themselves that I'm passionate.
Right. I know finding your community is so important. And I mean, as you get older, in some ways, you have people that sort of fall by the wayside, but then you gain new people. And what I've liked about getting older and really figuring out who I am is I find that I have these friends who have gone on that journey with me, and others who haven't. But
Right.
then I'm also getting to pick up new people
Yeah.
who are knowing me at the time when I'm knowing myself the most.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that part of getting older.
Me too. No, me too. I mean, one of the people I interviewed for this series is my college roommate. right? And
Yeah.
it was so interesting to talk to her and be like, man, so much time has passed and we're so different, but also there's this nugget of the girl I was in there,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
then I've interviewed people that I've known for 6 months.
Yeah.
But there's a nugget of the girl I was in that conversation too, right?
Right.
They just
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know her, right? In that same
Yeah.
way. But I love that thread, right?
Right. Yeah.
A
Yeah.
question I have for you is, sometimes it seems kind of bleak given everything that's gone on for the last 4 years. I call it murder hornets, like because the murder hornets came when we thought there was nothing else that could happen. Then the murder hornets came, right? We're like, what?
Right.
The world can
Yeah.
feel bleak, right? With war
Yeah.
and everything that's going on. What are you hopeful about for women and girls?
Yeah. Well, I think I see women coming together a lot more and supporting each other a lot more. I feel, especially in the context of church and church work, I have felt more and more that women are not buying into the scarcity mindset, that there's only so few opportunities that we have to, compete with each other. I've just seen really this sort of opening of support and wanting to push each other forward and support one another. And I think that's gives me a lot of hope. And then also, as we were talking about, just the community and finding your community. I just see so many different places now where women are working together and forming their own, coalitions, um, and that gives me a lot of hope because those are communities that have been really key to me being able to keep going and also to be an effective leader. I've needed those groups of women and those and that support and all of the knowledge and skills that come with those groups are just amazing. And so it just is, I love that I see women really surrounding themselves and surrounding each other with good communities of women and realizing that we don't have to go at it alone. We don't have to walk by ourselves. We're not an island.
Right.
uh,
Right.
we just are better together.
Yeah. And I think added to that, I think what's one of the things that's so important about building that community and having that space is like the intersectionality of, I'm a woman, but I'm a white woman with privilege, right? With this, I
Mhm.
have more education than most, or, so what can I do to step into spaces where other women who haven't had those opportunities
Yeah,
and maybe weren't born on third base, right? Or,
yeah,
how do I give them opportunity and pull them up with me, right? And make space. Kind of the intersectionality of, of our friends and women who are in the LGBT community and just
right.
different spots.
Yeah,
And I just like making the community broad enough that we
yeah,
say, hey, I see you and I recognize my privilege and my spot and I will make space for you.
right. I know. I just love that about I was talking to a young woman on Monday about that because what I really love about my other women friends who are also pastors and ministers is they have experienced being excluded.
Yeah.
And so their ministries are so inclusive on purpose. Like they know what it feels like to not be given a voice and to not have any sort of agency and or power. And so their ministries are what they always had hoped for.
Yeah.
That's what they're always aiming to cultivate. And I love that. That gives me hope too. And because the more voices we have at the table, as you're saying, the healthier and the better
Yeah.
that the community stands to be.
Yeah, I mean, we're missing, I think when we don't have those voices at the table, we're missing so much talent and
Mhm.
innovation and thought
Yeah,
and creativity that just gets lost by being diminished, right? And so
right.
to your point, when we as pastors or leaders or whatever we're doing, when we say, no, 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 everybody move, make some room. We need more people at the table that are
Yeah.
different voices, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think, as a pastor, what I hope people at our church see or that I'm walking with as a spiritual companion, that is the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
That's what God always intended for us to have is a multi-ethnic, multi everything community.
Yeah.
that's when I feel like, oh, I'm getting to actually see a glimpse of the kingdom, not when it's just a very, you know, similar looking and sounding group.
Yeah, let's just get, oh, in this part of heaven, we're only going to have these folks. And in this part of
Yeah, right,
yeah. Okay. That's what I mean,
right.
I agree 100%. Just that, what does it look like to say, of course you belong. Of course you
Right.
belong. Come on in.
Yeah.
Right. And not
Yeah.
be like, I mean, kind of, but not you. Like,
Yeah.
ooh, that's not for me and for many. It's the thing that pushes people away
Yeah.
from faith and faith communities, right?
Absolutely.
And so we want
Yeah.
communities that say, no, 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 come in, right? So I love that.
I do too. I find it, and that's one of the things I like about younger generations too, is I just see a lot of them are making it very clear that they don't want to be part of something that isn't that way. And
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for that. A lot of people in church conversations right now are wringing their hands about the decline of the church, but I see such an opportunity in the things that need to die.
Yeah.
And those voices, especially the younger folks that are are sticking, their foot on the ground and saying, no, this is not what we want to be part of. And I think there's so much opportunity there, and
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing what's on the other side of it.
Totally. I mean, I think one thing that I'm fascinated by and just so grateful for is that younger people, it's building community is just of course everyone's invited.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
they're like, you don't get to be in it if you exclude people, right? Like
Right.
you can't
Right.
be here if you're going to do that. Right. And
Yeah.
what I think for me took years to acquire the ability to say to someone, you can't tell that joke in my house.
Right. Yeah.
I was in my 30s before I was brave enough to say, not in front of me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But younger people are like, what are you doing? No. Like
Yeah.
they're just
I
so
know.
like, ew, right?
I know, I love it to hear the kids, like, our kids will say, "Well, what do you mean by
And
that?"
you're like,
And it's
I
like,
don't know. Right? Hold on, let me
Right.
think for a second.
Yeah.
I didn't mean anything bad. Whatever you think of, man, I didn't mean that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
I
love
love the way they ask questions like that to try to get at the heart of those things, you
yeah.
know?
They want to know, right? They want to know
Yeah.
they want to know what they're dealing with so that they can
Right.
decide for themselves what they're going to do next, which I
Yeah.
love. Right. I
Yeah,
think for
I do.
those rest of us, it took us it took a little longer to get there, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but I love that because I mean, I certainly at that age had lots of questions about, is this right? Doesn't seem right. Something feels wrong about this. But my community said, no, no, there's only one way to think about this. So think about it. And I was like,
Right. Yeah.
ooh, I don't know. Right. And so it
And
took,
also, you're not allowed to talk about it
right.
because you are not you're not one of the people that's allowed to talk about
Exactly.
it.
I didn't have the right
And if
parts.
and if you do, it has to be very specific at home. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. I love that. So my last question that I'm asking everyone during this series is, if you were going to give young Cheryl a piece of advice based on what you know now that might be beneficial to those who are listening, what would it be?
Yeah. Mm, that is a good question. I would say, I think that you should keep working on your listening skills. Never stop trying to be a good listener.
Yeah,
I think that's something that I'm learning over and over again in my life is probably the most important practice for me to engage in, skill for me to learn, is to be a good listener.
yeah,
And that's going to pay off in all areas of your life, your family life, your work life, your friend life, is to listen. And then I've been talking a lot in my work about power and what it looks like to be somebody that has privilege and power, and how to use it in a healthy way
yeah.
for the benefit of others. And so I guess I would say right now, just because that's on my mind, to be
Yeah,
somebody who's reckoning with the power and privilege that you have and how you're using it, and if you're
yeah.
using it for good. um,
Be a
I
superhero
did
who
get
uses your powers for good, not a villain.
That's what I remember you used to say something like that. Thank you for using your powers for good.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, I often talk to people now. I'm having similar conversations where I'll say, if I have control and I give you control, I feel like I've lost control.
Right.
If I have power and I give you power, I empower you. Now we both have power. And now we can actually both have agency.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm in control and I'm the boss and you do what I
Mhm.
say, and I think that's a lot of the structure we're trying to break, is a structure that says, I will empower you and then I will trust you to have agency.
Mhm.
Right. And I do think that there's so much to that. And those of us
Yeah.
with privilege have to be willing to be like, here you go.
Right.
Trust you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much trust involved in believing that power isn't finite,
Yes.
that there's more than enough for all of us. And I don't know that we really believe that. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so coming to recognize that because you're actually practicing it in your life is such a freeing and liberating thing. And so
I
yeah.
love it. I love it. This was so much fun. Thank you
Yes,
for chatting with me and letting me pick your brain about your life.
of course. I'm so happy to get to see you and see your face and see your living room and your cats and talk to you.
Yeah, me too. It's so good. It's so good. I'm super excited. Like I said, every time I finish one of these interviews, I'm like, that was the best one. So, so for today, you get to be the last best one until I talk to somebody else.
Oh, good.
For anybody who's watching, you'll notice in the corner, or maybe probably down here actually, that there is a QR code to donate to the Malala Fund. The Malala Fund helps women and girls get education in places where they often haven't had access, but also helps women and girls get access to leadership education so that they can be the next generation of leaders out there. So over the course of the next month, as we do this series, we're going to raise some money for the Malala Fund. So Cheryl, thank you so much for joining me and letting me talk to you.
Thanks for having me.